Hello guys, and welcome to another video. In this one I'm going to be talking a little bit about the new league mechanic, the Trials of the Ancestors league mechanic, because I haven't actually spoken about that much on this channel, and I kind of want to get my thoughts out there a little bit about the league mechanic itself. I have to say that I'm actually kind of enjoying it. I think that there's a lot of similarities there between this one and Sanctum, where you've kind of got this isolated gameplay which is kind of set aside from anything else in the game. It's not really like mapping or anything like that. And you can actually make characters specifically to farm the Trial of the Ancestors league mechanic, just like you could in Sanctum. People did that in the Sanctum League. They're actually doing it in this league as well for the no-hit runs. And of course, that means that you have some really interesting build setups for the pure purpose of farming Trial of the Ancestors. And in Trial of the Ancestors, because of the scaling of the mobs and things like that, well, the actual ideal build setup is one that doesn't really worry about damage, it doesn't really worry about how much life it has or things like that. It's more about how fast is your character, how much can it disrupt the enemy units, and how much avoidance can you get so that you don't just get one-shot by mobs later on in the rankings. And I think that is a little bit of a problem when it comes to the scaling of Trial of the Ancestors. The one-shots and things like that are quite annoying, and I think that GGG could probably do a bit to address that, and maybe allow a system where you can kind of continuously play at the same rank, but there needs to be something in there where gaining more ranks and fighting at higher ranks is actually more rewarding, because right now all I see is people on the Reddit and things like that posting that, you know, they're getting crazy rewards at rank 200 and the rewards up at 1500 are the same. So I'm not sure whether there's just a really tiny modifier in there which makes it a little bit more likely for rare rewards to show up the higher rank you are, but at the moment it doesn't really seem like that's the case. It just seems like once you get to a certain rank, let's say 200 or 250, well, everything from here on out is basically the same. You get offered similar rewards, and because the rewards are so different between different tournaments and things, it's really hard to say if ranking has much of a say in what rewards you actually get. But because of the scaling and the balance of Trial of the Ancestors, as I mentioned before, there's this thing where you kind of want to make a build which is all about trials, and the only thing the character does is farm trials. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about a build which I'm actually trying to make here. I'm playing solo self-found, so I can only really use what I have. And this is really interesting for me because I also play hardcore. But of course, even in hardcore, a character can't die in the Trial of the Ancestors unless there was a bug right at the start of the league. I know a few people lost their characters to that, so rip to those guys. But if the bugs don't exist, then a character can't actually die in the Trial of the Ancestors. And that's really interesting from a hardcore perspective, because there's like this completely isolated game mode, and you actually gain XP in there as well, which is quite interesting. And so this build that I've been designing is inspired by another thing that I saw. This was a post on the Path of Exile build subreddit. I will actually link that below if you guys are interested in checking out that. That was a Deadeye build that is using Chaos Inoculation, and it has no energy shield. So essentially, if the build takes any damage, you just die. That's it. You're just dead. But the build has so much avoidance that it's quite hard to get hit, and it has lots of movement speed and things like that. And that build was using ensnaring arrow totems, and that got me a bit inspired to think about what kind of tech can you use in Trial of the Ancestors. And so this is what I've come up with here. Let's actually take a look at it. Alright, so here we are in Path of Building, and obviously I haven't leveled this character just yet, but this is a general idea. I've got some items in here which I actually don't have, but they're really basic, and then some things that I do have. But I'm kind of making use of what I have, and let me tell you that if you're playing Trade League, there are way better ways to do this. But I'm not playing Trade League, I am using what I have. So first of all, we're using a Scion, and we are playing a Necromancer plus Gladiator setup on the Scion. This character is based on 3 labs completed, so we don't need Uber Lab. And the Necromancer is being used for Bone Offering, of course, to gain a large amount of block. And then Gladiator is being used for a bit of extra block chance, and also the chance to blind enemies on hit with attacks, which is really important, because we are scaling a lot into blind. There's a huge amount of blind effect here, and that also comes with a bunch of evasion rating. And so this whole setup is going to be a respec for me. I'm probably going to level on some kind of Armageddon brand cremation setup or something that's easy to level with, and then once I get to a certain level, I'll just completely respec this, and I'll be playing Trials on this build, and Trials only for the rest of this character's lifetime. And let's take a look at what we're actually using here. So in the bow setup, I'm going to be crafting a bow. Right now I just have a attack speed plus trigger in here. There's literally nothing else going on here, so super simple basic stuff. And we've got Desecrate and Bone Offering plus Inspiration for a bit less mana cost there, and also increased duration for more duration on Bone Offering. So we're going to have a very long duration Bone Offering whenever this does proc. And that's really important because we don't want Bone Offering to drop, because it's providing a lot of block. If I turn it off, you can see how much block that's actually providing. And in the main link, we have Ensnaring Arrow combined with Ballista Totems. This is going to be able to drop a bunch of totems. I think we have access to maybe 4 totems, something like that. And we've also got GMP in here, multiple totems for even more totems. I think this will bring it up to 6. And then we've also got knockback support, along with additional accuracy, so that we don't miss. And so we're going to be knocking back mobs. I know that they did patch out the perma knockback, but mobs do still get knocked back. They just have like a timer where they can't be knocked back again. But we're also allocating Fending, which is on our amulet here. And Fending is this notable over here on the Marauder side of the tree. And this one gives us a little bit extra chance to knock back, plus more knockback distance. And that's going to be really nice. And so, why Ensnaring Arrow? Well, Ensnaring Arrow applies a less movement speed modifier to enemies. And this less movement speed modifier is actually really powerful, because not only do we have less movement speed coming in from Ensnaring Arrow, but we're also running a Curse on Hit ring here. We're using Mark of Submission so we can use a full efficacy Curse on Hit setup. We're using Temporal Chains for a massive less action speed. And then we're also speccing into this Curse Wheel up here for more Curse effect on top of Temporal Chains. And enemies you curse are hindered with 15% reduced movement speed. So mobs are going to be very slow indeed. And we're of course going for CI. This is actually important so that you can channel the totem which has the AoE Chaos Degen around it. And that one just ends up being ridiculous damage at high ranks. So Chaos Inoculation is really important for being able to channel and destroy that totem. And that's basically it for the build. I mean, we're making use of Rearguard, as I said, for a lot of block. And then we're using Will Clash, which is giving us spell block whenever we have power charges. And we're just getting an extra power charge here. As I said, I would be using other items if I had them. But the main idea of the build is to try to get your spell dodge, your spell block, and your attack block all capped out. And this needs to be pure attack and spell block as well. It can't be glancing blows, because of course that will make you still take damage, and damage will just kill you. And so we're getting extra totem here, and we're taking arrow dancing because we're not really going to be getting hit by any melee attacks. The only melee attack that you might occasionally get hit by is the mob that kind of jumps on top of you really quickly and like pokes you with a spear. That one might occasionally get you, but it's usually these kind of off-screen projectiles that come in. And this is going to double your evasion rating against projectile attacks. And if we actually take a look at this setup here, we're actually set up against a monster level of 85, which is going to be, you're going to be quickly reaching that monster level as you continuously progress up the rankings. And we can see that with our accuracy debuff coming in from Blind, and we also have Dread Banner as well. I mean, Dread Banner is not really realistic for the range mob, so we can just turn that off here for a second. But we can see we have 93% evade chance against those ranged attacks. And I think Blind is pretty reliable because we're going to be dropping totems, and those totems have a chance to blind they're constantly attacking. And we have a melee evade chance, which is a bit less because of that keystone. But of course, that doesn't really matter too much because we do not plan on getting hit in melee too often. And so, yeah, this is the general idea of the build. You can see the sort of things we're using here. I'm just using some efficient training to get enough stats to use Dread Banner. And we've got some mana reservation efficiency here, a little bit more stats. And this is just like really basic gear. I haven't actually got any boots yet, for example. This just has some bone offering effect for some extra block. And we've got a little bit of suppression, bit of evasion on this body armor. Nothing special. We've got crafted attack block and attack block coming in on the implicit. As I said, you could make use of other things if you have them. For example, you could use the Rainbow Stride unique boots. If I actually search for those here, you can see that these have up to 20% chance to block spell damage. Those are some really useful boots to make use of. I don't have those, so I won't be using them. And you could use the Anvil Amulet, which gives a bunch of attack block. I'm actually using the Stone of Lassoir, and this one actually provides a bunch of spell block, which is quite nice. I would probably make use of the other one if I had it, because the craft for spell block on body armor is actually 1% higher, and then you can get the same implicit as this one has, but for spell block, so I could make use of that. But yeah, this is basically the setup that I'm going to be going for. The idea and playstyle behind it is you just kind of rush the enemy totems right at the start to try and grab aggro, and then you drop a bunch of totems. The totems disrupt the mobs, and then you can kind of run around and bait enemies into different positions on the map by channeling totems. And of course, with this setup, you are going to take damage sometimes, and you are just instantly going to die. But the thing is, as you rank up, you will get this more and more often, even on normal builds. And let me tell you, from someone who has played a Flamewood Totem build at League Start, and then I played a Righteous Fire build, and now I'm playing a Bone Shatter build, all of these kind of normal builds that you play in Path of Exile, none of them are very good for Triad of the Ancestors. They're all really bad. The only kind of builds I could see being generically good in Triad of the Ancestors is probably some builds that are already set up with like Ballista Totems on the right side of the tree, so they're already making use of that, and they can kind of mold their build a little bit and change different things slightly, and then they're already doing quite well. But in general, melee builds, not great. Righteous Fire is kind of basically a melee build. You just stand in range and just run in and deal some damage to mobs. So these builds are not great, and that's why I'd like to make a completely focused build on Triad of the Ancestors and try to farm the mechanic. And that's basically it. That's the kind of setup that I want to kind of go for here. I haven't leveled this character just yet. I'm going to be doing it soon. And I've been saving my silver coins for the purpose of doing this, because right now, what some people are actually doing is they're stopping at a certain ranking, let's say 250 or something like that, and then they win a tournament, and then they lose the next two matches so that they drop their rank purposely to the same amount that it was before. So you win a tournament, drop 2, win a tournament, drop 2, like that. But the thing is with that, every single tournament you're wasting 2 extra silver coins, and that might not seem like a big deal if you're playing Trade League and you can just buy silver coins, but in SSF you don't really want to be wasting silver coins. I've been saving up all the silver coins that I have, and it just means you're spending an extra 2 silver coins on every single tournament that you play, essentially. And the only reason why you're doing that is because your build can't afford to rank up too high, because you just start losing games at that point. And as I said before, that is a balancing problem, I think, more so than anything else. But that's just kind of how it is. And that's really it for this video, guys. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about Triad of the Ancestors and talk about my plans for a character to farm Triad of the Ancestors. And in a way, I kind of expect some big changes to Triad of the Ancestors, because they have been holding off this patch that's coming in. They said that they're going to fix the Titanic Shell. That's the big turtle monster that kind of protects totems and goes on flanking and just kind of can't be stopped. And it's really, really buggy as well at the moment. So they did say they're going to kind of fix that monster. And obviously we've got the new tattoos coming in. We haven't heard anything on that after like 4 or 5 days since they've posted that. So I do expect kind of a big patch. And I wonder if they're going to drastically change the balance of trials. Whether things like blind immunity and knockback immunity and monsters perhaps that can't have their attacks evaded and can't have their attacks dodged and blocked and things like that are going to come in. Maybe they add these things to the game and then they actually drastically change the damage as well so that things can be tanked. I'm not really sure. or whether they're just going to leave it how it is and they're happy with it for now, but they're going to iterate on it, because I do kind of expect Trials to go into the game in a core capacity at some point, because it's a league that's had a lot of work put into it. You can see that it's had a lot of work put into it, so we'll have to wait and see with that one, guys, and that's it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to my channel supporters as well. You guys are great. Really, really appreciate the support. And as always, stay tuned and stay safe.